In the wake of the Washington Liberation Front's victory over Fedra in Seattle, the new regime would order that all of the city's residents swear their loyalty to the group and order their forcible relocation to Soundview Stadium. The community of Hillcrest, in particular, was outraged by this move. But only when a teenage graffiti artist was shot dead by the WLF would that outrage find voice. But far from uniting the community in resistance, this senseless slaughter would lead to escalating violence, betrayal, and tragedy. This is the story of the Hillcrest Rebellion. Life in Seattle under Fedra was hard. The military would hoard resources, control speech, and dictate the jobs people did. But food shortages in the Seattle quarantine zone were more acute than in many other zones, exacerbated by the infected disrupting supply lines and, in time, civil war. It was in this context that Boris Legasov, a champion archer before the outbreak, would rise to become a leader in the community due to his skills against the infected threat. As his daughter Sophia put it, he was the best clicker killer in the QZ. Boris was also amiable with local Fedra officer Yolanda, who was stationed in the neighbourhood and even had Boris regularly care for her dog Alfie. With the WLF's victory over Fedra, Yolanda left Alfie in Boris's care when she fled the city to escape execution. Beyond hunting down Fedra survivors for execution, the Wolves also took a number of extreme measures to maintain control after their victory, including curfews and restrictions on movement between zones. Hillcrest resident Ellie, in particular, was involved in agitating against the Wolves and calling for resistance. This would lead to Boris's daughter Sophia getting involved in anti-WLF graffiti, a fact that Ellie would initially try to keep from Boris, thinking she would stop. However, eventually the WLF would order that all Seattle residents relocate to the Soundview Stadium, an effort to centralise supply distribution and solve food shortage issues. This would anger many citizens and lead to Ellie finally approaching Boris to help resist the move. As he put it, the Wolves were supposed to make things better. The military hoarded all the resources, controlled what we said, told us what job to do, and so far the Wolves are doing the same exact thing. And now they're talking about moving everyone to the stadium. What? I grew up in this town. I survived the outbreak in this town. I'm not moving to some refugee camp where some asshole tells me when I can or can't wipe my own ass. This is my home. We need a plan. We can't settle for the same thing. Soon after, the Wolves would catch Sophia in the act of graffitiing one of their banners and gun her down. This would temper Ellie's urge for rebellion, leading to him urging Boris to let things cool down. Meanwhile, other residents like the Brandmans would decide to accept relocation out of fear for their own children. For others, the WLF's access to proper medical care was also a reason to move. There was particular concern for local garage owner Dale, whose dementia was getting worse. Boris, meanwhile, would allow his rage to take over and use his skills to wage a one-man guerrilla war against the WLF. A resident would witness him assassinating a three-man WLF patrol against their own van. Despite their sympathies for his loss, this would mark the turning point, where the residents rallied against Boris, out of fear for the WLF's retaliation. Using the meeting points they had previously rallied at to discuss rebelling against the Wolves, Ellie and others would meet after curfew to conspire against their former community leader. Boris, however, would learn of their betrayal and exact his revenge first. Angered that they wanted to appease those who had killed his daughter, he poisoned the residents in order to put them to sleep and dragged them into Dale's garage, now filled with spores. His intent was that they would watch each other turn, losing their minds, and suffer, thinking all the time of the betrayal that brought them their fate. Ellie was the last victim. However, he woke up before Boris could leave, and was able to bite him, leading to Boris also turning. He wrote out a last confession addressed to Yolanda, including his lament that he could no longer take care of Alfie, and locked himself in his own garage to face his fate. With Boris, Ellie, and the others locked away, and the rest of the residents having surrendered to the WLF ultimatum, the community of Hillcrest was left to fall into ruin. Though the Wolves would patrol the area, they would not bother to maintain it, and were mostly concerned with rooting out any potential trespassers and keeping the Seraphites at bay. Years later, Ellie Williams would enter the area in search of a fellow trespasser she believed to be Tommy Miller, but who would turn out to be Jesse. Following his trail, she would find evidence of the Hillcrest community's rebellion and their betrayal of Boris, including opening Dale's garage to be confronted with the massive runners that had been the local residents, and finding a stalker who had been Boris, now less than a shadow of himself. The bow with which he had won archery competitions before the outbreak, that he used to first protect Hillcrest from clickers and then to take vengeance against the wolves, was still slung over his shoulder. But the mind of the man who had undertaken those acts was gone, wrapped up in cordyceps tendrils. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. Like the video that just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. This is a Patreon and member supported channel, so if you want to become a member and unlock custom badges and emojis, early access to my videos, and your name in the credits, then click the join button below. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.